Alrighty, welcome back. And we are continuing on with the About Me digital book. Just to recap here, though, in class the previous week, we went through the basics of design, basics of typography, as well as color. And we've already started in on your digital book, and we will continue on working from there. We finished up part one, where you went through, selected several fonts to install and use for the project. Hopefully you have done your part outside of class time, where you needed to collect the content for your book, and that included coming up with a minimum of 7 photos per spread, and there were those spread topics, as well as then writing captions in a Google Doc for each and every one of those images, and went through the caption writing process. So now we're on the actual page layout process here, part 4. And so let's jump over into InDesign and get going with it. So here in InDesign, what we want to do first is we want to choose Create New. And under Create New, we're going to have it to where it is set to picas. And we're going to be using 66 picas wide. So that's 11 inches wide. And then we have it 8.5 inches or 51 picas tall. So that's the height to it. We have it set to orientation to landscape. So basically what this is a US letter size that's just simply turned to landscape. For pages, we have it set to 12 because we had 5 spreads. 5 spreads, 2 pages each. There's 10 pages plus a front and back cover, so 12 pages worth total. Then from there, we have our margins set at 1/2 inch each, and we just had it to where it's linked, so it all sets them all equally. We'll go ahead and choose Create, and this will open it up. So from here, what I want you to do first off is come here under the View menu and come down to Grids and Guides, and let's go ahead and show that document grid, and then let's go back one more time and turn on the snapping to that document grid. Now this sets up our grid to where we have the large section set to 1 inch, but then we don't have it set to picas interior. So we're going to come here under the InDesign menu, and you may not be able to see this quite fully, but I'm going to come in under the InDesign Preferences and choose Grids, and that will open up this little dialog box here. With that dialog box opened up, I'm going to change the subdivisions to 6. So I want 6 subdivisions, right, for every inch. So that's going to make each one of those subdivisions exactly a pica. So that will work out just nicely. So now you can see we've got picas in there, so each one is a pica. The larger box is an inch. So we've got that all mapped out. I'm going to come here under my pages. Notice currently we have selected just page 1, which was going to be, in our case, our front cover. We'll come back to that in another portion, but let's just jump here to page 2, 3, and then I can use my keyboard shortcut Command minus, and I'm going to zoom out just a little bit to be able to get a nice overview to this. So for this part, what we need to do is set up our eye line. We want to create our eye line then to base our graphics off of. So if you were to look and remember, what we had talked about previously was this bullseye. And when we talked about the bullseye, we said how we wanted to keep our image and graphics in tight towards the center. Then exterior of the graphics or images, in our case, we would want our text or copy. And then anything pushed outside of that would be the white space or negative space. So we want to keep this bullseye in mind as we create our design to this. So first thing we need to do is establish our eye line. So to do that, I'm going to come down here to my swatches, and you'll notice my fill. I currently don't have a fill, but I do have a stroke. I want to swap that around, so I'm going to just press that right there, or Shift X. That will then swap that out so that I've got a fill color, and I just have it set to black, the default for right now, and I'm going to choose a rectangle, and I'm going to click a rather large rectangle and just have it drag out across here. So I could have tried drawing that exactly to 1 pica, but I didn't, just for time. And so I'm going to come here under Properties, and under the Height property, I'm going to set that to be 1p. And I can just press Tab, and that's going to make that exactly 1 pica. Now currently that's somewhat centered up in our spread, and we don't want that. If you recall, we talked about the rule of thirds in class, and we want to break this up and divide this so that we have more of a rule of third going on, so we throw things off balance here. So we could have 2/3 up top, 1/3 down below, or do it the other way to where we have just maybe 1/3 up top and then 2/3 down below. Something to help throw this off balance to add visual interest to it. Okay, so once I have my eye line established, what I want to do is come and grab my frame tool. Now, the first thing you always want to start with is going to be your dominant object, or in this case, our dominant photo. The dominant photo needs to be easily 2 to 3 times larger than any and all the other photos on the spread. So what we want to do is just click and drag out. Now I'm going to have this dominant photo go across the gutter. And the reason it's going to go across this gutter is simply to help tie the two pages together. Okay. Now, if you'll notice currently, this is not set fully to the grid because once we resized our eye line, we needed to snap it to that grid. So I'm going to come down and find where that eye line needs to go. And then I can adjust my dominant photo so that it is sitting exactly on that eye line. We want to use our grid structure to our advantage, right? I'm going to just slightly bring this in a little bit so that we do have some of the image over, but the majority of the image is going to be over to the right. That will help us when we come and place an image in here. We can make sure that we keep anyone's face or any important object out of that gutter. Remember, we don't want any text going through the gutter and no one's face through that gutter. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind as we start selecting images and how we place them in there. Okay, so from here, what we want to do is come back, get our frame tool, and just continue on with this and creating a variety of shapes and sizes. So maybe this one, I'll make a nice vertical image to it. And then from there, I can simply duplicate that just using my selection tool and then pressing and holding down the Alt or Option key. And then that could allow me to duplicate just to speed things up here. And that way I don't even have to go back to my toolbar any longer. I can just simply use that Alt or Option key and then duplicate over and then adjust these around and make things just fit. Okay, so notice I'm keeping one pica vertically as well as horizontally in between these frames for these images. Okay, that's going to help us keep nice clean alignment. If you remember our CRAP, that crap, yep. We want to keep that contrast, repetition. This would be that alignment. We want to keep that alignment all nice and cleaned up to this. Okay, so we're going to continue on. Right now I currently have 4. Notice those first 4 are all sitting on top of our eye line. So now let's go ahead and go back, and what we can do is create some that are hanging from our eye line. So again, I could just simply select one of these, press and hold down that Alt or Option key, and then drag it down. And let's just fit it in there. And you'll notice that kind of fits nicely as well with where our eye line was versus where our margins are as well. Okay, I could duplicate one more over. This one, let's go ahead and fill it in through here maybe. And maybe we want a nice wide image there. Maybe a group shot there. If we didn't want something that wide, we could pull it back. We could always adjust these accordingly and maybe make something like that. That way we have a space over here for our caption. So now we've got some room for captions. So we got to keep that in mind as well. Okay. From here, what I may do is just take this one and then move it over. And this one, let's make our big, large group one. And again, we want to make sure that we are having these actually hang from that eye line. We don't want that additional gap because we're going to delete this eye line out once we get everything placed. But for right now, we do want to make sure that we do have these actually then touching that eye line. Okay, so if we were to zoom in, you can see I've got this sitting on top of the eye line. This is hanging from that eye line. We don't want an additional spacing there. So just for this basic design, this is kind of how we're going to flow things. Notice on these, I keep them within the margins, and this I can pull back in and make sure that it aligns up then with that image above to keep that nice clean alignment just for this project here. Okay, so this is our basic design, and if you were to look at it, we've got 4, 5, 6, 7 images, the minimum number that you need to have for your first spread. Okay, so now that we have our frames for our images, let's go ahead and add our text filler boxes, right? So we'll take our text tool, and same way we did the frames before, we want to keep that 1 pica spacing to it. If we need to, we can always adjust then again with our little selection tool. Then to help identify this as a text frame, what I want to do is come here under the type menu and then down towards the bottom of the type menu. It's kind of hard to see, it's being blocked by this graphic right now, but it says fill with placeholder text. And that's going to fill it with placeholder text. Okay, so then from there, what I can do is simply select that. And again, like we did before, I can just duplicate it using that Alt or Option key. depending on whether you're working on a Mac or PC, whether you're doing this from home. This one down here, we may actually have more text in it because it may be a caption where that it goes for multiple images. So we could look and say, hey, this caption goes with this image, this one goes with this. We could actually break this up and have this caption going with this image and then make another caption in through here if we wanted, and we could have it go to where it actually goes with the image below. Again, keeping that spacing to it. Okay. From here, we'll just move one more over. Maybe we want for our big group photo here a nice size caption for it for all the names. And then up here, what we want to do is create an area for our headline and our story. So to do that, I'm going to grab our text tool again. This time though, what I'm going to do is come through and drag out, and I can see that I'm making that 12 picas wide there, and 12 picas is 2 inches, and you can see there's the first column that I want to do. But for my story, I want to make it just 2 columns wide. So I'm going to then have 2 columns here, and I've got these 2 columns, but I need to link them together so that the text will flow from the first column into the second. So to do that, I'm going to select the first one. I'm going to come down here to this little box right here. I'm going to click on that, and then that allows me then to get this little filler text. When I then move over a text frame, notice not an image frame, but a text frame, I get a link. So that's going to link those two together, and I can click that. Now when I choose my placeholder text, it will then fill and keep this continuous to it. So if I resize this or make it smaller, larger, whatever, it's this text flowing from this text box into this text box. So it works out really nice. So depending on the length of your story, we can then adjust that accordingly. Up above that, I want to grab my text tool, and this time I'm going to just click and drag out a text box for a headline. And for this one, I will, instead of placeholder text, I'll just go ahead and type the word headline, so that helps me distinguish that one to be different. We could come through and choose our headline font, whatever you had set aside to be your headline font. And I'm going to go ahead and change the size of it so it's nice and large, and we can see that that's going to be our headline. So the next portion will be us taking this, and I'm going to show you how to take this particular spread and then duplicate it over for the rest of them, and then begin placing your images into the spreads as well as your copy that you've written up already in your Google Doc. So that'll all take place in the next video. Thanks.